elected senator in Legislative District 1. For those that don't know me, I'm 44 years old. I'm born and raised in Vineland, New Jersey. I am a member of the Greater Vineland NAACP, and I have been a member for a number of years. Last year, I was honored with the Freedom Award by the Greater Vineland NAACP for business individuals in the area. I'm not just a member, I'm an active member and have been since joining. My 9th grade teacher, Mrs. Ella Boykin, is the person who really made me aware of issues. She's been a lifetime member, I'm assuming for a lot longer than I have. I mean, she was a member when I was in 9th grade at Vineland High. I graduated in 1994 from Vineland High School. I went to Villanova University where I played tennis. I graduated from there in 1998. I went to Villanova University School of Law and I graduated there in 2001. And I have my master's degree in trial advocacy that I received from the Temple Beasley School of Law in 2006. Some of these bills, I have to tell you, are highly important. I mean, I'm sure they're all important to you, but I can tell you I represented a defendant a number of years ago in Atlantic City. Large majority of my practice is criminal defense, also personal injury, but in the criminal defense case I had, there were 2 officers that were in question in Atlantic City that were also the subject of a federal lawsuit charged in state court, and these officers had pending civil actions against them in litigation pending in Camden federal court, where their files were at issue. Federal Judge Schneider, I believe, was the first judge in the state of New Jersey to order the release of their personnel files. And what was at issue was between the 2 officers, there were over 100 IA complaints between them, and they were always shielded, that were never to be ordered to be released. And Judge Schneider ordered them to be released in the federal court. I had a court order ordering them to be released in state court, which ended up going to municipal court because of the downgraded charges. And it took the city of Atlantic City over a year and a half to get me those records after a court order. So these bills are important because people shouldn't have to go through the rigmarole of hiring an attorney and trying to get all of these records, which should be available. Now, granted, you know, the first bill that we're talking about, I don't want to get too deep because I want everybody to get time to introduce themselves. But the first bill that we're talking about, which in the Senate was 1482 and in the Assembly was 744, as long as people's very personal information, such as social security number, personal address, as long as those things are redacted, I see no problem with those records being released. And in fact, I sit on the Senate Budget and Appropriations Committee. And if you look this up, you'll see that myself, Senator O'Scanlan, Senator Oraho, and Senator Thompson all voted in favor of this bill to be released from committee. So that's the first bill. I don't want to get too deep into it. I want the Assemblymen to speak. Obviously, they're much more familiar with Cape May County than I am because I'm a Cumberland County born and raised guy.
Yeah, I'll jump in. The fortunate thing with all these bills we're going to talk about this evening is each one of us that went through one of our committees. Like the senator just said, Senate Bill 1482 went through he was involved in that directly. And I can tell you that really all the rest were at some point has gone through a committee. So for those that don't know how the Assembly works or the Senate works, it goes through the assigned committee first. If it's voted through the committee, then it goes to the Senate or the Assembly floor to be voted on by either the Assembly or the Senate. So the senator just spoke about the first bill. The other bill is some of the other ones. One is requiring the Attorney General to collect and report prosecutional and criminal justice data. And I know that our senator is the law. I guess he's our go-to law guy. So if there's anything I'm leaving out, Mike, please jump in. But this basically is and this went through the Community Affairs Committee, which I'm part of, that we all voted unanimously to pass. And that's that the Attorney General is required to create the information program with the state police. And what that does is the county prosecutors, the judiciary and corrections departments collect and record and analyze data on defendants who are older than 18 at the time of their offense. And then the majority of data required for collection is already collected by the law enforcement and prosecutors. And basically what this does is it creates a data collection program that helps the Attorney General issue annual reports summarizing the data for a website so people can go there and access this information, which before wasn't easily accessible. And again, that's something that was passed in one of the committees. I'll go through a couple of them just because I was on the committees for them. And one of the other ones is, let me see my list here, is the another important one was Bill A-1906, which it basically penalizes making false police reports. We've all seen most recently in the news the woman in Central Park who accused a minority of harassing her, and this penalizes making false reports and 911 calls to intimidate or harass a protected class. And it adds falsely incriminating another person or filing false police report to the list of crimes that can be charged as a biased intimidation crime. So that's something that passed unanimously. I'm going to move quickly because I don't want to take up too much of your time this evening. And then if you have any questions, you can ask any of us as well. And again, I was on the committee for most of these, went through the Community Affairs Committee. The next one is A-2394, which requires minority police recruitment programs. And in a nutshell, that just, it requires law enforcement agencies to establish a minority recruitment program so that they can create police departments that more resemble their peers in that community, whatever that community looks like, which I know we've talked about that in our roundtables with the prosecutor's office up here or down here in Cape May County. And again, I'm not going to read you the whole bill, but you can look into that. But basically, that was also something that was passed unanimously. The good thing is all these bills were pretty much unanimous with the exception of a few abstentions. The other one is requires implicit bias training for police, which is A-3641. And that amends laws, basically amends laws by abiding implicit bias training courses and materials, online tutorials, et cetera, for training to promote positive interaction with the community outreach programs and all residents, including racial, ethnic, and religious minorities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals as well, residing within our communities. So another important piece of legislature. I'll do one more and I'll pass it on to Antwan. Another one that went through the Community Affairs Committee, which I was a part of, is it bans the chokeholds by police. And that's, it is what it says. Basically, this bans police from using the chokehold any longer, obviously with the George Floyd incident and many others around the country, but George Floyd being the most notable. This bans the chokehold, which was trained formerly for police officers. And, there was some discussion as far as, there are certain chokeholds that are, used to subdue people that don't kill people. Obviously, the George Floyd was not one of those. But this bans it altogether, and I believe, and I voted for this. I think it's a good move. There are plenty of other ways that the police can subdue and control someone in custody rather than this, as we've seen. I'm sorry, I don't know if I mentioned that bill. That was Bill 4263. And in the Senate, it's Senate Bill 2562. Then, Alex, I believe you have all these up on the website, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And now I'm going to pass it off to Antwan because I believe, and I didn't mean to take up a lot of the bills, but just because they went through my committee, there's one. I know there's a couple more. Antwan, if you want to elaborate on 4275 and the jurors, that went through my committee as well. So I don't want to, steal everybody's thunder. They're bills that I went through thoroughly and researched because they went through the committee that I was on. A lot of those were the community affairs committee bills that went through that obviously were reviewed by the committee of community affairs. So I pass it on to Assemblyman McClellan.
Good evening, everybody, and it's good to see everybody. Even though we're not in person, it is good to talk to you via Zoom. So there's about a total of like 9 bills that I was a part of in the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus. So we discuss these bills. We meet every Tuesday via conference call, and we discuss these bills and try to make sure that we got these bills through the Assembly and passed on to the Senate to get to the governor's desk so that he can sign them and make them into law. 2 bills that of the 8 that weren't mentioned, one was the decriminalization of marijuana, which is Bill 1897 in the Assembly, Senate 2101. And I know how important this was, especially to the senator, to start to try to decriminalize marijuana in those small amounts and stop, harassing and giving us records for small amounts of marijuana, which amounts to nothing, and pretty much ruining kids' lives for minuscule amounts of marijuana. So that's a very important bill that we're trying to get through as a caucus. And also the one that Assemblyman Simonsen mentioned, which was 4275, which expands the juror pool. And the hope with that is that when you go to court and you're expecting to see a juror of your peers, you expect to see a juror of your peers. And we can go to court and 95% of the people don't look like me when I'm looking at that juror pool. And it's slim pickings for us in that juror pool that we look at. So it's very important that we're going to start to reach out and make sure that we get more people of color into the jury pools. So when people have issues, that they actually get a full complement of people that are their peers, and not necessarily just people from out of the community that don't know, understand, or can pretty much care less of the plight of minorities, so to speak. So those are total. I think we went through the 8 bills that the Legislative Black Caucus presented and put through over the last couple of weeks, and there's going to be more to come that we're working on and trying to bring forward. And also, we've been in constant contact, with Noble, which is the National Organization for Black Law Enforcement, and the president he actually did a Zoom call with myself and Minority Leader Bramnick on Facebook probably about 3 or 4 days ago. And then also, as a Legislative Black Caucus, we've had him in to talk to us about other bills that we can possibly bring forward to try to make sure we take care of the disparity that the police have as far as hiring minorities, and also dealing with civil service, which is a state-run organization that people don't know about, and how we can try to work through that system and get in there. And then if they get hired and get to the interview process, how we can talk to the officers that are going through the interview process that are not going to give them check marks for things that have happened in their past that really should not be things that they should release them from consideration and getting hired in the areas that they need to get hired in. And that goes with municipalities and also with the state police force also. So that's the bills that we have. And any other questions that you guys have on those, we'll be glad to answer them as we can go forward.
Didn't you guys pass an assembly? I'm not sure if it went to the Senate yet. The Black Lives Matter Day, or?
Yes.
Yes, that was passed in the assembly.
What was that
our last session?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
If you can explain that bill, or
off the top of my head, that bill was to make July 13th Black Lives Matters Day, and to celebrate that day as Black Lives Matter Day in the state of New Jersey. So it was passed to the Assembly. I'm not sure if it made it to the Senate yet, and I can pull that up to get you more information on that. Bear with me 1 second.
And Alex, I'll just chime in. There was some debate amongst a lot of us in the Assembly, and that is the support that Black Lives Matter, not necessarily the organization Black Lives Matter, which puts a lot of disparaging things on their website and things like that. So, I mean, I support Black Lives Matter, obviously 100%. I do not support the organization itself as it, you know, as to defund police departments and the anarchy and the Marxist views of that specific organization. But yes, I voted yes, and I know Antwan did, and several of our constituents. I think it was unanimous with a couple abstentions. But so it is. We did make a day in New Jersey that is dedicated to Black Lives Matter.
Okay. Did you want to add anything, Senator?
It's not up in the Senate yet. It hasn't come up in the Senate.
Okay. Did you want to add anything else to the other bills that were talked about?
Well, you know, certainly, look, I practice criminal defense, and I've seen where young folks who, you know, either live in neighborhoods where police officers know that there's a lot of activity. It does seem sometimes, obviously, that the police officers go for, you know, low-hanging fruit, so to speak. So if there's 10 kids that are hanging out and there's the strong odor of burnt marijuana emanating either from a vehicle or from the crowd, that's the language that is used almost in every single police report that I've ever read when it's coming from either a vehicle or a crowd of individuals that are hanging out. Look, I mean, I was very for decriminalization because of the fact that so many kids get caught up in the system, and then what will happen is they'll lose their driver's license, and they get behind the proverbial 8 ball after, you know, again, losing their driver's license. Then they have major fines. Then they have, you know, periods of suspension. And look, Cumberland County is similar to Cape May County. It's pretty rural. You know, there's not a lot of public transportation for people to get to and from work, to and from school. They may have family members who need to get to the hospital, and there's no such thing as a necessity driver's license. You know, other states have provisions that allow people to, you know, sort of provisional driver's license that they're allowed to only go to work, you know, work, church, and school, so to speak. We don't have that in the state of New Jersey, and look, we don't have great public transportation in Legislative District 1. You know, we talk about the global sense of being a representative, and we don't like taxation without representation. And yet so many of our tax dollars go to public transportation throughout the state, and we don't even have it here. So, you know, that's one of the main reasons why, as a defense attorney, I can tell you, I've seen some folks, and look, some kids who are 19 years old and they're angry and maybe not as informed of what their rights are as far as getting an attorney, or the fact that they should get an attorney, whether it's court appointed or not, and they refuse it, and they get a really raw deal. And, you know, the family will hire me a year later while to clean up the mess that was made. And look, and then that costs a lot of money, and then they have to go to Motor Vehicle Commission, get their license reinstated. It's a real problem. So that's really what I'd like to add to that. I mean, you know, and look, I get that the other side, people say, hey, driving in the state of New Jersey is a privilege, not a right. I fully understand that. That's the way our law works. But again, you know, I don't think someone should basically have the rest of their lives ruined for something that happened when they were 19, 20 years old.
Right.
Mr. President, just to follow up on that bill for Black Lives Matter, it's A as in Apple, J as in James, R as in Richard, 171. That's the bill number, and it designates July 13th of each year as Black Lives Matter Day in New Jersey.
And could you repeat that one more time?
Sure. A as in Apple, J as in James, R as in Richard, 171.
Okay. And the bills that we talked about, how many actually got passed?
All those bills got passed.
All those
in the Assembly, all of them got passed in the Assembly. I'm not sure where they stand in the Senate yet. I know that on our Legislative Black Caucus call, our chair, Senator Rice, was working on that, and he didn't give the exact bill numbers, but he knows that that's what he's trying to bring forward with Senate President Sweeney and the rest of the senators to try to get those bills moved forward through Senate and passed.
Yeah, Alex, they were all passed. There were no votes in any of the, there were some abstentions here and there, but from what I remember, and I'm not going to go through all of them, I believe they all passed unanimously with the exception of a couple abstentions for different reasons.
Oh, okay. And I'm sure in the Senate they get passed too, Mr. Senator. I mean,
I would believe so. Look, I vote, like I said, the one that came before my committee, I voted it out of committee. So it appears that there's going to be strong support. I mean, obviously, even though it wasn't unanimous, we don't have abstentions in the Senate. I want to be clear on that. You know, we don't have the same amount of buttons. I wish we did sometimes. Assemblymen McClellan and Simonsen. At our desks, we either have a yay or a nay. That's it, and we don't get to abstain. So there's such a thing as a no vote. You don't press it, and that's sort of the equivalent, but it's really frowned upon when you do that in the Senate. So, you know, you may see somewhat different numbers in the Senate. To piggyback on what Assemblymen McClellan and Simonsen talked about the resolution for Black Lives Matters Day. You know, there's specifically some language in the resolution which is of contention because it doesn't just talk about Black Lives Matter holistically as you know, meaning that Black Lives Matter. It specifically speaks to the organization Black Lives Matter, which, you know, has some points of contention with defunding and disbanding the police, and some statements that have been made by one of the founders of specifically Black Lives Matter. So there are points of contention that are out there. Look, you know, I'm a proud member of the NAACP. I will always support the NAACP. It's been in existence since 1908. I'm a card-carrying member. The mission statement of the NAACP is highly important and is reflective of our United States Constitution, specifically the Equal Protection Clause. It almost is verbatim of the Equal Protection Clause on the back of each and every one of our membership cards. You know, that's something I believe in 1000% and will always support. I will tell you some of the language that's come from the leadership of the movement Black Lives Matter. It has been troublesome at times.
okay. Well, I guess we if you don't mind taking a few questions. If not, then, you know, I guess we can wrap up this portion. You know, you don't have.
Can I ask a question?
Alex, I have a question also.
Okay. Shannon?
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Senator and Assemblyman, for your work on these 9 bills. My name's Shannon McDevitt. I'm a constituent in Cape May County. I wanted to ask, moving forward, if you would work to end qualified immunity in the state of New Jersey. And also on the bills, and pardon me, I'm not a lawyer, or Bill S322A711 to create a reparations task force in New Jersey that would make policy recommendations for communities of color.
So which bill number was that you would reference?
S322/A711 to create a reparations task force in New Jersey that would make policy recommendations for communities of color. And your thoughts on ending qualified immunity in the state of New Jersey.
I can speak to the reparations bill because I know we've been talking about that in the Legislative Black Caucus. I know they were they're trying to get the language, make sure it's appropriate, but creating the task force, I don't have any problem with creating a task force to investigate, you know, anything. So it's good to get, you know, people in a room and talk and weigh out the consequences and see what's going to happen with that. So, as in the Legislative Black Caucus and also in my daily life, if anybody wants to get together and talk and you try to get a group of people and try to work some things out, I'm for that, and I plan to support that. The other bill I'm not too familiar with. I would have to look into that.
And on ending qualified immunity, anyone?
Yeah, that bill.
Specifically, could you speak more to what you mean by ending qualified immunity for anyone or for any specific group?
For police in the state of New Jersey.
In what type of case? It's a civil matter if they've committed a criminal act?
I believe it's if they commit a criminal act against, you know, in an arrest.
Well, I mean, you know, just to be clear, they can be sued personally in federal court for what are called 1983 actions already. If in fact they've committed what amounts to either, police brutality or things of that nature. So I don't know specifically what you're talking to, because as I said before, I do criminal defense work, and I also am a PBA lawyer. So I do both sides of the aisle there. So I'm not specifically sure. As to reparations, I can tell you I would be against reparations. I don't see how that will. I think that issue will only further divide us, not make us come together.
Assemblyman Simonsen, did you add anything on that?
No, not really. I mean, I don't have that bill in front of me, so I'd like to look at it further. But I know that, with Assemblyman McClellan being on the reparations task force, I'm confident in the information that he gets and distributes to me and to others in the assembly is going to be, accurate, and we'll take it from there. So, I mean, at this present time, no, I don't have an answer.
Yeah, the bill is the creator task force, so there's no bill in place to say we're issuing reparations, but the bill is the creator task force and to investigate and look into it. So, and that's what we're trying to bring forward to create that task force.
Okay. Rob, Mr. Matthews.
How you guys doing? I want to draw attention back to the marijuana bill that was recently passed, Senator. I'm reading online where it says instead of arrest, there is a $50 fine. How can they give someone a $50 fine without arresting them? What are they going to pull them over, harass them, get all their information, and then just give them a fine? Could you explain that, please, sir?
Look, I actually believe this bill is premature because it is going to be a referendum vote on the 2020 ballot. I mean, so
Okay.
I really think we should just wait for that at this point. I think the public's voice is going to be heard. It's going to be a referendum vote. And again, I think one of the problems is there are a lot of bills that have very good intentions, but they don't exactly know how they're going to implement them. And folks that want to put legislation forth that aren't necessarily and I'm not saying that you need to be a lawyer in every instance for sure, but if you're going to start speaking about, the criminal law or the judicial system, they should have some high level of familiarity with it before they start, sort of meddling, because it may not have a mechanism by which they can do that, which you just pointed out. So,
sure.
Kudos to you.
Another question. Thanks. Another question about that bill, or is there a bill that's going to be put on the ballot for the legalization of marijuana?
It's not going to be a bill. I think it's just going to be a referendum question. Referendum question.
Okay, and if passed, or, I'm not sure what New Jersey's folks are doing up in North Jersey or South Jersey about it. If passed, does Cape May County have a plan in place to counter that, or to, get ahead of what might occur?
The answer is no. Look, I will tell you this: I'm not necessarily a fan of referendum voting at all. That's why you have representatives that are elected, like myself, Assemblyman McClellan and Assemblyman Simonsen. I'm not a big fan of referendum voting. I think it's an easy cop out for politicians on both sides of the aisle to place something on a ballot for people to easily just say, "Hey, look, the people spoke." Sure. It wasn't us up there. It wasn't myself and Assemblyman Simonsen and McClellan. Exactly. We didn't vote for this. But the answer is no. There's not going to be any, if it's voted on referendum, it's going to be the law.
It's law. Yeah. And the last thing, I just want to do a shout out to my partner Erik on the student athlete physical bill that was passed, Erik. Since I'm a graduate of Low Cape May High School, it is what it is.
Thanks, brother.
Well. Thank you for that.
And I know we were all part of that, but it hasn't passed yet. It's still got to go through the assembly. It didn't go through as smoothly as I would have liked today, but it's all good. It's all good for the best for the kids.
All right, make it happen and put my name on it, would you?
You got it, brother.
You guys later. All right.
I would like to ask a brief question if I could. I'm a recent NAACP member. My name is Zach Latour. Thank you for spending some time with us today. I understand that there are contentious statements being debated upon on the Black Lives Matter website, for instance. That's kind of irrelevant, but something that was brought up on the town hall meeting to me that really stuck with me was, a push for police licensing, not only ending qualified immunity, which I also, think would be a reasonable thing to do, but I wanted to ask your opinion, Senator, if I could, on some kind of police licensing program, which was kind of discussed pretty well in our town hall meeting. I'm sure you weren't there, but that's okay. Are you familiar with any kind of program that might be, able to be activated within our, our state, for instance?
I mean, I have to tell you, New Jersey police forces have, one of the highest training programs in the United States of America. I'm appalled when I've heard about some of the training programs that are in other states and how it varies even from county to county. When you have, people who are elected officials, like, for instance, if the sheriff's department is trained only by itself, but, statewide, New Jersey is really good at making sure its officers are trained to a very high level. Does that mean that there are no bad apples? Of course not. There are bad apples that I could tell you that most police departments that I've ever dealt with identify them, and through the result of progressive discipline that occurs, really try to make sure they weed out those bad apples rather quickly. I can tell you, look, I'm a criminal defense lawyer and a PBA lawyer. There are times when you can readily identify someone who has gone over the line, way over the line, and has a pattern of that behavior. Now, look, I will tell you, this was well documented in Atlantic City. There were a few bad apples that the city covered up for years. That's a horrible situation. It went to federal court. That's why Judge Snyder made a very drastic decision in the state of New Jersey for what most people thought, and said these two individuals need to have their internal affairs records revealed to counsel. And it was, obviously, when it's involved in a case, it's under a code of confidentiality. You're not allowed to release it to the public. But guess what? It actually did get released to the public because of how bad it was. And I think there were, don't quote me on the exact number, I want to say the number was 114 between them, and all of them were unfounded. If you see numbers like that, that's atrocious. That means that, the police are investigating themselves and they found nothing wrong. But I can tell you, that was the most egregious case. I can tell you from either representing defendants and representing officers, I've yet to have, seen a pattern of behavior like that, other than what was publicized about the Atlantic City Police Department. But I'm not 100% familiar with police licensing, is what you're talking about.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, you'll have to forgive me. I'm not, necessarily studied on the topic myself, but I imagine that some sort of licensing program that would, enable us to basically revoke a police officer's ability to, for instance, like if they were a bad apple at one department, essentially attempt to stop them from moving to another department.
Well, there's actually legislation. I don't mean to interrupt you, Zach. I apologize.
No, you're fine.
There's actually legislation right now that would, again, through that, so people wouldn't have to Oprah request it and things of that nature, that would be more readily available, because that was something that was done years ago, where someone could resign in good standing and then get transferred to another department. That's not happening anymore. I can tell you that. Not in the state of New Jersey. So,
well, and I'd also, Senator, like to interject. I mean, that's one of the bills we discussed tonight, the Assembly Bill 744A, the sharing of police personnel files. That's something, why that didn't happen before, who knows? I mean, but it's a step in the right direction with the Attorney General being able to review these files as they're shared from police department to police department. So, if you're an officer, let's say I'm an officer that has several issues like you're talking about, and I can't just move, they can't just move me to another police department like has been done in some places. So that's one of the bills that we're talking about tonight is the requiring of the sharing of police files. And I think another bill that we're talking about tonight is really important, and that's the one that requires minority police recruitment programs, because in those communities with more people of color, there should be more officers of color. And Assemblyman McClellan spoke about the same on juries, and that's what we're working towards as your representatives here in Legislative District 1. I will say, with that being said, and some of you on this call have been involved in our roundtable discussions. I know our you know, our county sheriff's department, our prosecutor's office have all come forward with our police chiefs. And I think we're very fortunate down here that we've done a lot of community policing with the younger people, and that has to continue and even grow and get better. But I think that we're ahead of the curve, and I hate to use the word curve in this day and age, but you know, I think that's where we're moving towards, similar to what you're talking about, I guess.
Interesting. Thank you. That's all I have for you.
Sure.
Zach, hello.
Alex,
This is
do you mind if
Cheryl
I ask a
Baldy.
question?
I am with the Cape May County Prosecutor's Office. I just wanted to answer your question. I'm just reading here now. It says New Jersey will soon launch a statewide database of police use of force and create a licensing system for police officers amid national protests over police violence. The state's
Very
top
cool.
law enforcement official stated on Tuesday. So that is what's coming down the pike.
Thank you very much for letting me know that. I appreciate it greatly.
And your timing is impeccable.
Yeah, seriously.
Senator and Assemblyman, I don't know how much more time you have. Do you have time for a couple other questions?
Sure. We
Sure.
have a
Sure.
7 o'clock meeting, but we're good for another 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is
Susan.
Susan Blood. I'm in Cape May County, and I just read End of Policing by he's an expert in social work, but he's been working with police departments for 30 years. And I don't know if have any of you read that, because if you have, then I can kind of establish where we're at.
I haven't.
No, I have not read it.
And I certainly am not, you know, I didn't ask that to put anybody on the spot. I actually had a little extra time last week, so that's why I picked up the book. But and I certainly show absolute support for police in general. I don't like the word defund. I think it misleads people. It puts the police on defense, and so I like to think of it as police evolution. But this book, I would strongly encourage that you take some time to read it, because it really does lay out some ways that the police can evolve through these times, and how they can kind of meet the challenges that that our society is facing right now. For example, the Minority Police Recruitment Program, that is a common bill that is often passed when something happens like George Floyd. And actually the research shows that minority men do not show any less bias towards Black people than white men. Research does show that Black women tend to not have as many incidents, but that's one thing that surprised me when I was reading it. Another thing that is often recommended, or bills that come out when a George Floyd incident happens, is the implicit bias training. I think all police forces today have been doing implicit bias training. They have excellent training, and there's not a lot of research that shows that improves any of the fatalities with Black society. So that again surprised me when I read that. The decriminalization of marijuana is probably one of the best bills that you could have passed. So I just want to, you know, commend you for that, because it's bold, and it does, it's strongly recommended for helping, you know, like what you just said, Senator Testa, in terms of reducing that all of these people being put into jail or arrested for minor reasons.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I had a question for the senator. Well, I had a couple comments for the senator, actually. The one comment was, you said you're against reparations. I didn't understand that, but I respect your opinion. In my opinion, the only way we can move forward as African Americans is if reparations is received. The Indians received their reparations. We never received our reparations. That's the only way we can move forward as a Black community, though, in my opinion. The other thing is, the bills are good, but are we dealing with training? What are we doing with training? And you said that the police are highly trained in the state of New Jersey. That's nice, but a simulator is not an actual person. It only simulates the activities of a person. So what are we doing to ratify the training for the police department? Also, um, w- we've been talking with the prosecutor's office, and we got a board that's talking to them about putting together a community review board. Maybe you can help us with that. Putting together a community review board so we can identify these bad apples that's in the police department. We can review their records and see how is it that these cops are allowed to stay on the force when they have all these different infractions or anything against them.
Well, I could tell you, I sat on the, the ethics committee for reviewing legal ethical issues with, that are filed against lawyers. I thought one of the greatest ideas that we had, we didn't want to ever look like a body of lawyers investigating ourselves and finding nothing wrong with any of the activities that have allegedly taken place. Certainly a community review board could do that. But again, I think that there would need to be serious education with regards to the use of force, with proper police practices given to those civilians who would sit on that board. I also think it would be probably even more beneficial to have maybe 1 or 2 civilians from the community be involved with the internal affairs process, so that this way it is a little bit more open. But again, those civilians would need to be properly trained, similar to what's called continuing legal education, so that they would understand what it is that they're looking at, whether it's on a body cam, whether it was a use of force report, was it a proper arrest technique? Were there proper questions asked that led to, an issue, that led to an internal affairs complaint? I think that there are a lot of things that the community could be involved in, but the community would then need to be trained, whoever those members are, because, their standards are going to be totally different than what are the real legal standards.
Right, I agree with you on that. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Chris Hines, second vice president, but I'm also 11-year military police officer, veteran in the Army. So as looking forward to putting a community review board together, I would definitely look for highly trained people that may have been prior law enforcement or prior military that has experience in that aspect, or lawyers that has experience in that aspect as well. But we want people that's not biased to just the police department. We want them to see both sides of the apple.
Understood.
I'm sorry about that, Senator. So I had so much on my mind. But coming back to one thing that Chris said, one of the things that I read was how police forces are trained, and the military training that they go through and the SWAT team training that they go through is very extreme compared to what they really need 90% of the time. So, this, I think it probably wouldn't hurt to look at the training that they receive. Most of it is military, and that's one of the things that the book touches upon. Another one is the Attorney General is the reviewer of, correct me if I'm wrong, because I might have read this wrong, but in most states, the Attorney General reviews any kind of, investigation, and he's the reviewer, and he is an outside reviewer outside of the police force. One of the things this book recommended was to have an independent review panel for any kind of investigation, because the district attorney does have close ties with any police force. So,
well, again, I would highly disagree with you on that. I mean, like in cases that I've dealt with, when if you just and you said 2 things. You said the attorney general and the district attorney. So that would be the county prosecutor. Any real severe cases, particularly if it's a shooting, discharge of a weapon, that automatically will not be reviewed by the county prosecutor. That then gets reviewed by the state attorney general's office as well as the state police. So I can tell you that it's not the hometown effect, again, of we've investigated it ourselves and we found nothing wrong. That's not the way it works in the state of New Jersey. And I can tell you, I've been through a state grand jury where my client was cleared because it was thank God the victim did not, it was actually originally a perpetrator, but then the victim of the officer discharging his firearm, where the perpetrator had a weapon that he was going to fire at my officer. It was in his waistband and he was reaching for it. And thank God he did not get killed, but it went to state grand jury and my client was cleared. I mean, I can tell you that's a long and arduous process. And that was about, I'd say 16 months post incident where that took place. So I can tell you the officer was walking on pins and needles for 16 months. So.
Okay, and then the last recommendation that I haven't really heard a lot of people touch upon was it came from an article about the police force in Oregon, where they've replaced a number of their cops with a mental health slash, it was like a mobile task force that's composed of a mental health professional, a nurse or paramedic, and maybe a third person, but that van went around, and it's actually operated successfully in Oregon for 30 years. I'm just wondering if, I know that, you know, whenever you go there, you're talking about changing the police force and i.e. defunding part of the police force. But I'm just wondering if there's talk of that, of at least creating a small task force to take care of, one, the homeless instead of dealing directly with the police, the mentally ill in the town, and even drug addicts who are not violent.
Okay, yeah. And that's the last question. I know we gotta respect people's time, and I know you guys gotta go. So if you have anything to add to that, and I appreciate your passion, Susan. Thank you.
I can speak to the training as far as that concept is, and there's two different styles of training. I don't know about the military, but I know as far as dealing in the sheriff's office and dealing with the training facility here, that training is entirely different than what you're going to receive as SWAT. So the higher that you go up in law enforcement, the training is going to be different, and you get a different style of training. So they're not receiving military style training here. There might be some aspects of military that they do, and that's training in general, and they receive that with the fire department also. But as far as military style training and SWAT and things of that nature, there's different levels depending on where you're at in your law enforcement background and what you're trying to do. So those aspects of training are different, and right here the Cape May County Training Facility is the best in the state and one of the top in the nation. You can look into that. They've done an excellent job at putting out officers and things of that nature and training. So we have a lot of people coming here to get trained by our people here. So they've done a good job with that. Now, as far as the other aspect, I don't know about if Senator Testa knows, he can speak on that, or Assemblyman Simonsen.
No, Assemblyman McClellan, you gave me Exhibit A in the Cape May County Training Facility. You know, that's what I was speaking to. The two facilities that I'm very familiar with, one of them being Cape May, their record is stellar. There isn't, look, and Susan, I will tell you, you know, nationally, I've seen where many police departments have become quote unquote militarized somewhat. When you see Humvees, surplus Humvees from the military that are now being used by police departments. Look, when I see a small municipality, and I've read articles about that, when a small municipality with a low crime rate has 2 Humvees, that certainly makes me look at it with somewhat of a jaundiced eye. Why do they need that? Why do they need military equipment to police a small community? But I can tell you, I'm not in favor of defunding or disbanding the police. That's when I call the police, God forbid something happens at my house, I want them to arrive, and I don't want a social worker.
All right. Okay. Well, you know, I know you guys got to go. I appreciate your time. Before you go, anything you want to say before you go, Senator and Assemblyman?
I'll just say thanks for having us. We're always available. We're accessible anytime. You know that, Alex, and the rest of you got Chris. You guys know anytime you need answers from us or have questions, we're available. And just God bless everybody. Take care of each other, and hopefully we'll get through this COVID thing soon enough. So God bless. Thanks for having us.
I really appreciate y'all coming.
Thank you for having us. We'll always be available and honest. So you might not like the answers, but
Absolutely.
Yep, thank you. God bless. Have a great day.
Thank you.
All the best, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.